Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Welcome back to another game collection video. This is actually part 2 of my PlayStation 4 game collection. If you missed part 1, released last week, it is linked down below in the description. Also, if you were looking for more of just a dedicated top 25 PlayStation 4 video, that's split into 2 parts, will also be linked down below. Let me know what are some of your favorite PlayStation 4 games as we go through the remainder of my collection today. Are there any notable games not here that you think I should own? I'm always looking to kind of expand my PlayStation 4 library. It is arguably my favorite game console of all time, right next to the PlayStation 2. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right back into the game collection. All right, now I mentioned this in part 1. Everything here and on my shelf is alphabetized to the best of my ability. Naturally, some games get misplaced, and this first one should have been included in part 1 given where it is in the alphabet. That is Everybody's Golf. The reason why it was misplaced is because I was recently recording gameplay footage for a retrospective kind of series review of the Hot Shots Golf series, which is one of my kind of go-to comfort food gaming franchises dating back to the PlayStation 2, and I was thrilled when it was recently announced that Namco Bandai, no longer Clap Hands, who previously developed these games, is releasing Everybody's Golf Hot Shots in September. So in the lead up to that game's release, I've just been kind of going back through the series, recording gameplay footage, and instantly reminded why I fell in love with this series back on the PlayStation 2. That classic 3-button click system, just good arcadey golf. It just hits right, you know, like Mario Golf on the N64 and the Game Boy Color. And Everybody's Golf is no exception. This was a little bit different in the fact that you had kind of more of an online community that you could kind of interact and play with. You had kind of an open world hub where you could do a variety of things, including fishing. You could create your own character in this game. It really is just an awesome entry into the Hot Shots Golf series. So if you've not played any Hot Shots Golf games, really easy to pick up, super cheap, but also look forward to my upcoming retrospective series review of the Hot Shots Golf series here real soon. Next up, we have The Last of Us Part 2. This is the special edition with a little mini art book, as well as this steel book case with Abby and Ellie on the front and back. And something I meant to bring up earlier in part 1 of the collection video is there are certain games where I will write down notes and then I will kind of just stuff them in the case so that when I ever revisit that game down the road or just pull the game off the shelf, it's kind of fun to kind of revisit my thoughts. And there are tons of notes here. Be careful zooming in and reading any of this because I will be sure to mention very particular moments that happen in the game. And that was an experience that literally finished in 3 days. This is a 30-hour game. I got my copy on Friday and I just beelined it over the course of the weekend. And I remember rolling credits at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and just texting my brother-in-law and needed someone to talk to kind of come down from this experience and just process everything that happened. It is a very emotionally taxing experience, and it kind of is unrelenting over the course of those 30 hours. There are these like brief moments of levity, whether it's a flashback or just a cutscene that hits just right and gives you kind of that time to catch your breath before it's just foot on the accelerator and just again beats you down emotionally. I'm still of the opinion that this game is brilliant, and I think regardless of which side of the fence you are on in terms of the direction they take this story in and the things that happen to certain characters, I think you've got to give Naughty Dog credit for just directionally leaning in unapologetically to where they wanted to go, regardless of how you felt about it, right? You've got to give them props for that. And a game that I do want to return to and replay at some point, I just finished season 2 of the HBO show, and it did get me excited is not the right word, but maybe ready to return and see that story from beginning to end once again. We have another game that is a bit of a challenge to get through, not because of its difficulty, but maybe just the subject matter we're dealing with here. That is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, a deeply immersive kind of third-person experience where you're playing as this young woman, Senua, and she has psychosis. So It's recommended to play this game with headphones, but how they approach that, I guess, emotional disorder is really interesting. I was reading that the game was actually developed in collaboration with neuroscientists that actually have life experience with psychosis. So they really wanted to approach it authentically with empathy, and I think they were successful in doing that. Very simplistic gameplay design. There is no real HUD. There's no health bars or anything like that. It is intended to be very deeply immersive, and environmental puzzles that will not really give you a hard time. They really want the focus and the core of this experience to be putting you in the shoes of Senua, and yeah, very successful at doing that. I need to get around to playing the second game. Unfortunately, I do not think that game was very successful for Ninja Theory, but one I want to play through for sure at some point. Next up, we have Little Big Planet 3, a game I've unfortunately not played. I've actually only played Little Big Planet on the PlayStation Vita and Sackboy: A Big Adventure. But what I love about these games is, one, you cannot deny just how adorable Sackboy is as a character, just the overall kind of yarn aesthetic of these games. Very charming platformers with very inventive level design. So I've been wanting to kind of go back to Sackboy: A Big Adventure, so maybe I'll just pop in Little Big Planet 3 and play that at some point soon here. One of my absolute favorites on the PlayStation 4. I loved the older Spider-Man games on the N64, certainly the ones that were based on the Sam Raimi films, Spider-Man 1 through 3, but Insomniac knocked it out of the park with Marvel Spider-Man here. Such an amazing take on the character. I am still of the opinion that this first game story supersedes Miles Morales and even Spider-Man 2, just set across these like 3 different distinct arcs. And yeah, I mean, just really cool how they laid the foundation for Peter. They brought in and kind of introduced Miles, all the surrounding characters, just kind of seeing Peter's relationship with MJ, Dr. Octavius, and a number of other villains too. It's just one of my absolute favorites, and I've actually played through this game beginning to end twice here on the PS4 and the PS5 remastered version. Great DLC as well, just a real all-timer for the console. Next up, I'll actually kind of save this for next. We have the Mass Effect Legendary Collection. I've also been really wanting to replay the Mass Effect trilogy. I remember I came back from holiday break when I was in college. It must have been 2012 or 13-ish. Whenever the Mass Effect trilogy was first released on 360 and PS3, I had never played the games before. And literally back to back to back over the course of a break, it was like 3 weeks, maybe a couple weeks actually, I played all 3 back to back. Absolutely fell in love with these games, and just Commander Shepard going through these adventures. Some of BioWare's best work for sure, and it's unfortunate as we get into this next one here. Just a fall from grace for BioWare with where they took the Dragon Age series, Mass Effect, and I just don't know if that company can ever be salvaged at this point for the amount of faith that they've lost from their hardcore fan base. Mass Effect Andromeda. I got this actually at Bookman's out in Arizona for $4 when I was game shopping with Jason Heine back in the day. I think it was actually back in 2020, 2021. I really want to play this game. I've heard from some of my friends that really love the Mass Effect games, like some of their favorite games of all time. They've said Andromeda is not as bad as people make it out to be. Certainly, it is a far cry from that original trilogy, but not as bad as people make it out to be. So, what are your thoughts on Andromeda? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Maybe before I jump into the Legendary Collection, I will play Andromeda. Next up, we have a remake of a cult classic on the PS1, that is Medieval. It's a shame that PlayStation wouldn't do something like this nowadays, so I'm thankful we have the PS4 game here. I just don't think something like this would be worth the return on the investment and the dev time it would take to get something like this out the door. But simplistic gameplay mechanics, you're running through these rather linear levels, but if you go off the beaten path, you're going to find plenty of collectibles and secrets. Playing as this little skeleton Sir Dan, some light platforming, but more or less just kind of a fun hack and slash adventure that's great to play around the spooky season. I need to return to it though, because I never ended up rolling credits. Maybe I just was not the gamer that I thought I was, but that is, it's tough. It was a pretty tough game when I played it a few years back. One of my absolute favorites on the console, Middle-earth: Shadow of War. I don't know where my copy of Shadow of Mordor is, but this one just kind of upped the ante in every meaningful way in this second game here. And unfortunately, I think the last game we'll see in this Middle-earth series, I think it was a relatively conclusive story for Talion, but I also thought there was a lot more that they could do with the character, whether it was a prequel or some kind of side story in this universe. Monolith created such an amazing gameplay system with the Nemesis system. I'd love to see that in other games, but I think they do have patent on the gameplay system, if I'm not mistaken. But running around this massive open world where they definitely take some creative liberties with the Lord of the Rings lore, but I really loved how they just leaned into that for the purposes of this story. You have kind of the Assassin's Creed like parkour system, being able to scale buildings, but then the Batman Arkham style combat. Again, that Nemesis system, just being able to kind of command different like orcs and trolls and things like that, and just kind of going to an arena and seeing one of those guys kind of stealthily make their way into an encampment and like take out an enemy officer was just, it never grew stale. And again, I just wish we could see that gameplay system in other games, because we didn't get enough of it even with these two Middle-earth games. And I still will continue to shout from the rooftops that these games do not get enough love. I do not hear enough people talking about them. I wish we would get kind of remastered ports for the PS5, because I would happily replay them again. Next, we have a game and really a series that I just don't think is for me. Monster Hunter World. I've tried so many times to play through this game with my brother-in-law, who is a massive fan of this series. He considers World his favorite game of all time. So naturally, I really tried to get into it. We played through the main story. I just think the rinse and repeat design of going into the open world, killing a monster, coming back, and doing that dozens, if not well over 100 times to kind of unlock different parts of the monster, grinding it out to get that next gear piece or next weapon or whatever it might be, is just, it's just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. I am much more interested in something like Dragon's Dogma that has similar gameplay design where you can kind of scale monsters in the open world, but there is more of a story to it. It's not just the core gameplay experience is not just about grinding new gear. There are story elements that you're looking forward to, different towns that you can travel to, and that's just not Monster Hunter. It is about grinding gear, and that is just, unfortunately, not something that interests me too much. But I can definitely appreciate and respect so much of what this game does, and certainly understand why people love it as much as they do. It's just not for me. Sorry, Ryan. Next up, we have a duo of JRPGs. We have Ni no Kuni 1 and 2. I think Wrath of the White Witch is better in nearly every regard. The story, Studio Ghibli was still collaborating with Level 5 for this particular entry. There's so much to love about Wrath of the White Witch. Unfortunately, I just cannot get into the combat system with those Pokemon-like creatures, the familiars. There was just something about it that I just didn't find engaging. It was not as compelling a take on Pokemon as I was hoping it would be. And even when you evolve these things, their stats get like reset, as I remember. I want to go back to it. Again, I put 30 hours into this game. I would just love to see the story come to its conclusion. I remember when this game was first released, I had it on the DS, that massive collector's edition that I imported from Japan. And I never thought we'd see this game in the West, but we did. And there's a lot to love about it, but unfortunately that combat system just was not my thing. However, Revenant Kingdom, I absolutely loved. It is more of an action RPG akin to the Tales of, so think Tales of Vesperia, Tales of Xillia. And in addition to kind of that real-time action RPG combat, you have a lot of other interesting things that they were doing with this, including these like real-time strategy gameplay sequences that I thought were pretty fun. But really, the big hook of this one that sucked me in was kind of this town building, Sim City-like simulator. And it's not... the learning curve is not steep. It is simple enough that people that don't like that type of stuff, I don't think it's off-putting. But for people that do, you can really get sucked into it, and it can be quite addicting. I'd love to return to this game and earn the Platinum Trophy. I'd love to just return to it and replay it because I really, really loved Ni no Kuni 2, Revenant Kingdom. And so I think your mileage may vary. I've heard people that swear by the first game, can't stand the second. I'm kind of just of the opposite opinion. Next up, we have a game that I've not played. I haven't even broken the seal on it. It is Neo, The World Ends With You. I believe this is a sequel to that cult classic on the Nintendo DS. And similarly, you're controlling a party of characters kind of simultaneously. And so instead of a dual screen and controlling characters with the stylus, everything is kind of mapped to the face buttons on the controller, as I understand it. And more than anything, why I really wanted to get this kind of console version is to be able to just run around Shibuya. The graphical style in this is just beautiful, and the music in these games are phenomenal. So really looking forward to playing this at some point. It is pretty long, and I just don't know if the combat system is going to be something that can kind of hold my interest for dozens of hours, because it kind of couldn't for the DS entry either. But I can really respect these games because they are hyper stylized and just a ton of fun to play. We have another duo of JRPGs here, but first up we have Nier Automata. I've not played this game to completion. I've also not played Nier Replicant to completion, unfortunately. I've dabbled in both. I can see why people love these games. Nier originally kind of had a cult following to it on the 360, PS3, and then I think Automata is really where this kind of saw mainstream success. Automata is really interesting because not only is it kind of more of an action RPG, the series I could probably best compare it to is Kingdom Hearts in terms of its combat. But there are like some bullet hell sequences in that game. It is a roller coaster. A lot of really interesting things going on. Replicant, this remake came out a couple of years ago, and I've been meaning to get into it, and I just haven't quite played it yet. But even though I've not played either of these games to completion, one thing I've done a tremendous amount of is listen to their soundtracks. Phenomenal. Some of my favorite music in all of JRPGs, and that's certainly saying something for games that I've actually not put too much time into. So I don't need to tell you, you should play these. A lot of people have, and you know why. They're special. Next up, we have another Vanillaware side-scrolling action RPG. This is Odin Sphere, a remake of the cult classic on the PlayStation 2. Just visually stunning, similar to Dragon's Crown. I've not had an opportunity to play this. You're beginning to see my JRPG shame here. There's just so many on the PlayStation 4. It is a good problem to have. Whenever I'm looking for any type of JRPG, I have plenty to choose from on both the PlayStation 4 and 5. Next up, we have one of the most shameful games in my backlog, Okami HD. My wife loves this game. I personally have never played it, though I did love Okami Den on the Nintendo DS. Just a hyper stylized action adventure that seems to kind of borrow a lot of gameplay mechanics and just character progression from the Legend of Zelda series. One I cannot wait to get around to playing, but deceptively long. Like, when I was looking at the how long to beat, this is like 35 plus hours. I'm sure every minute is well worth your time, but I just need to make sure I'm in the right frame of mind before jumping into a game of that size, but cannot wait to when I do. Next up, we have Psychonauts 2. I also have not had an opportunity to play this, but I am a huge fan of 3D platformers, so it's one I cannot wait to get around to. I love this kind of like lenticular cover that's on here. It also kind of comes with, I think, some collectible cards and some stickers, which is kind of neat. Not many 3D platformers I can point to and say the story is at the core of the gameplay experience, but I think Psychonauts and its sequel here do a really nice job of kind of approaching mental health with their games, and that seems to kind of be at the forefront of its storytelling. So very much looking forward to playing Psychonauts 2 at some point. I'm thankful that this got ported to PlayStation, which means I can earn the Platinum Trophy. But what I find interesting about the Psychonauts games is that, yes, they are platformers, they are 3D platformers, but that really isn't the foundation of the experience. I think its storytelling really is. And as a Double Fine game, Tim Schafer at the center, very goofy, over the top, but looking forward to getting around to playing that sometime soon for sure. We have Ratchet & Clank, the 2016 game. It's kind of a loose retelling of the first Ratchet & Clank game on the PS2. Love this game, got the Platinum Trophy, had to play through it 3 times to earn the Platinum. Just a really breezy, fun Ratchet & Clank game. You really can't go wrong with that series. Last on this particular pile of games, this kind of first stack is all of Rusty's shameful, I've never played this game before. Red Dead Redemption 2. Loved the first game, played it on the Xbox 360. Rockstar doesn't tend to miss. And another one that I just have to be in the right frame of mind for, because it is a massive game that takes a tremendous amount of time to get through, but it is certainly worth it. A prequel story to that first game. I know nothing about it from a story side of things. Nothing has been spoiled for me. So I'm looking forward to playing through this game and seeing what all the hype is about Red Dead 2 at some point for sure. All right, I'm not sure which I have more of, Assassin's Creed games or Resident Evil games. I still think it's amazing, similar to kind of like Final Fantasy, that you can pretty much play every mainline Resident Evil game on one console. I probably won't go through each of these individually with like a lot of my thoughts, but we'll kind of just cycle through here. So we have the Origins Collection, which has the very first game and Zero. I've never finished the first game. It can be a little bit cumbersome with those tank controls, but certainly, you know, looking back, you can see why it was so groundbreaking for survival horror when it first released. We have the collection of Revelations 1 and 2. I loved this game on the 3DS when I originally played it, and it's nice to have kind of a console port of that. Revelations 2, I don't think that came to 3DS, if I'm not mistaken. That may have been a console-specific game, just a sequel to the 3DS version. But again, really nice that we have console versions of both of those games. Resident Evil 2, I'd never played the original on the N64 or PS1. And my gosh, I could revisit this probably like every year, every other year around spooky season. Very few games in any horror game I've ever played compare to Mr. X chasing you around the police station. His footsteps, legitimately terrifying. As an adult, I mean, it is just freaky as all hell playing through this game and just looks amazing. I'm so thankful that Capcom has continued to kind of remake 2, 3, 4. I hope they remake 5. I personally love Resident Evil 5, and playing co-op is like the only way to experience that game. So I hope here soon we hear about a remake of the 5th game. But 2 is an absolute classic, and that remake is just flawless. Resident Evil 3 among the fan base kind of tends to get a little bit more hate, I think because it's shorter. As an adult, as a father, short games do not bother me at all. And getting through a horror game in like 4 to 6 hours, sign me the heck up. Not as good as 2, but still a lot of fun. Just kind of playing as Jill and Nemesis. Also probably not as terrifying as Mr. X, but pretty freaky nonetheless. We have a PS4 remaster of Resident Evil 4, one of my favorite games of all time. I've probably made my way through this game at least 10 different times across the PS2. The Nintendo Wii is actually a really fun way of playing through 4. PS4, the remake on PS5, just again, one of my all-time favorites. Resident Evil 5, played through this game co-op with my brother-in-law a couple years ago because he had never played it. I originally experienced it on 360, and I don't want to say timeless, because if you're playing single player, the AI is pretty bad, but when played co-op with a friend, brilliant. One of my favorites of the 360 generation for sure. Resident Evil 6, very divisive among the RE community, and for very good reason. I don't know how to articulate my thoughts about this game because it is so bizarre how you can play as like Chris and then Leon, and each character controls so differently that it feels at times like you're playing a completely different video game when you're experiencing their different stories, because it's like a global pandemic and you're on different sides of the world trying to get things back under control. I also don't want to say this is a bad video game because I think similar to 5, when played with a friend, can be an absolute riot and a ton of fun. I probably need to play this with my brother-in-law though before I could like share concrete opinions overall. It's all right, probably not as bad as people make it out to be. And then also one of my absolute favorites, Resident Evil 7, one of my top 25 PlayStation 4 games. If you watch that video, I think coming away from RE6, Capcom made the very smart decision to go back to its survival horror roots, taking things into the first person, set in this creepy house down in Louisiana, playing as this guy named Ethan, trying to find out what happened with your wife. Everything that happens in that house is just so perfectly paced as you kind of interact and run into different people in the family and have to kill them. It's just so good. Been meaning to go back and replay this game at some point soon. But again, so neat that we can play through pretty much the entire of the RE mainline series on the PlayStation 4. Next up, we have another game that I've not had an opportunity to play. That is Rime, a third-person kind of puzzle adventure game. The best comparison I can make is Journey meets Eco. It is exploration-based, relatively linear, but going off the beaten path. You're going to discover secrets and collectibles and things like that. But at its core, it is very much kind of a puzzle-ish platformer adventure game in the style of Journey and Eco. So if that kind of sounds like an interesting game to you, definitely one worth checking out, wanting to get around to playing for sure. We have Star Ocean, the Second Story R. I believe this is a remake of a classic turn-based RPG on the PlayStation 1. And what I love about this game in particular is that it kind of borrows inspiration from the Octopath Traveler kind of 2.5D HD RPG graphical style. So one I've not had an opportunity to play, but I really would love to play that on the PlayStation Portal at some point. Next up, we have a game I've not had a chance to play. My wife absolutely loved this game. I think it may have been her game of the year when it released. That is an indie gem called Spiritfarer, where it's kind of like a 2D adventure game where you're helping these animals kind of bridge the gap between the end of their life into the afterlife. So heartwarming, probably gut-wrenching at times, because you're building relationships with these characters, with these animals, and then helping them to kind of come to grips with their life as they kind of make their way into the next, into the afterlife. So very emotionally charged, probably pretty a tearjerker type of game for sure, but one I need to get around to playing still. I don't even want to say this is a shameful game because I think a lot of people stare at this game in their backlog and just look the other direction. Persona 5. Not because they don't want to play it, but because this game takes like 80 to 100 plus hours to complete. I have not played a Persona game to completion. I think the remake of Persona 4 will be my kind of gateway into this series. The social dynamics of like creating these links or these bonds with these characters, I think theoretically sounds really interesting to me. I'm just not sure if the games are for me or not. I think the music, the graphics, everything exploring Japan, there's so much about the Persona experience that I think I'd absolutely love. I just don't know if those social link things are for me or not. I won't know until I play it. It'll be a while before I get around to playing Persona 5 Royal. I think the best place for me to start is the remake of the 4th game when it releases. We have Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game complete edition. This is kind of a port remaster of sorts of that classic Xbox Live Arcade beat 'em up. Super hard, but if you are a fan of the manga or the movie, this is an absolute must. Just a really great kind of homage to both the manga and the movie. Great music, but very difficult. Fun to play co-op with friends for sure. We have the Sega Genesis Classics Collection. Just the best way to kind of conveniently access a lot of the Genesis gems. I'm not going to go through every game here, but you have probably 30 to 50 games on the Genesis. And as someone who didn't grow up with that console, more of a Nintendo kid, it's nice to kind of just pop this disc in and get a flavor for a lot of the Genesis library without needing to actually own the console and all of those original games. Next up, we have a duo of games that should be a trilogy. I don't know where the first game went. We have Rise of the Tomb Raider. This, of course, is the reboot of the Tomb Raider series, developed by Crystal Dynamics in partnership with Square Enix. I loved these games. I'll never forget, I think it was the E3 trailer where the first game was originally teased and they kind of had this label of Lara as being this survivor. She crash lands on this island. She kind of has to very scrappily make her way and become the Tomb Raider by the end of that game. And just, I think the perfect way to reboot this series. Heavily inspired by Uncharted for sure, but you have more crafting mechanics that would probably lean more into something like The Last of Us. And just over the course of that first game, discovering the bow and arrow, by the end you get the dual handguns. It's just a really special game. These games don't overstay their welcome, at least the first two. I think Rise of the Tomb Raider is very much the Uncharted 2 of this trilogy. Found its footing, it's bigger, grander in scale, exploring the Himalayas. Just a lot of fun. Really kind of came into its own in this sequel. Unfortunately, I think Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they just did not have a clear vision for the trilogy on the story side of things, but also what made the first two games special. They try to kind of go semi-open world with this third game. The story is like end of the world, sci-fi channel, B-movie craziness by the end. And while the core gameplay experience to me is still a lot of fun, stealthily making your way around these environments, picking people off with your bow and arrow, all of that is a lot of fun. Of course, exploring the tombs, those environmental puzzles that you would expect to see in an Uncharted game, all of that is great. But I think the story just really goes off the rails in this third game. And unfortunately, I just don't think these games met the sales expectations of Square Enix, which sucks because I really think having another Tomb Raider-like game coming out nowadays, since Naughty Dog has kind of shelved Uncharted for a while, would be amazing for me personally. But these are also games that I think I could go back to every couple of years and replay because I really do just enjoy that Tomb Raider Uncharted-like experience so much. Next up, we have a collection. Shenmue 1 and 2, games that I've never played to completion. I've played the majority of the first game, and if I had a Dreamcast growing up, it probably would have blown my freaking mind. It was doing a lot of the open world things that Grand Theft Auto was doing before Grand Theft Auto 3. And being able to kind of freely explore the city, go into shops and interact, walk up to an arcade machine and play classic Sega games. It was just doing so much that was way ahead of its time that I just don't think got the recognition it deserved when it first came out. Obviously, it has a cult following behind it, but I just don't think it got the praise that, of course, something like Grand Theft Auto eventually got a few years later, maybe a year or two later. Next up, we have Song of the Deep, a game made by Insomniac. It is a gated exploration game with kind of a cel shady like graphical style during its cutscenes more so, where you're playing as a submarine. So similar to your Metroidvania games, as you make your way deeper into the depths of the ocean, you're unlocking different mechanics where you can kind of go back and explore areas of the game you couldn't previously explore. A really great soundtrack too that's very fitting for like underwater exploration. So if you like gated exploration games, Song of the Deep is definitely one to check out. Now, I've never really been a fan of the Sonic games because I just truthfully am terrible at them. But Sonic Colors, when it originally came out on the Wii, just really caught my eye. I think the graphical style, maybe the music, I just figured that's the Sonic game for me. Never ended up playing it on the Wii, but then they remastered it for PlayStation 4. So wanting to get around to playing, as the name would imply, I just love how colorful the game seems to be. And I don't want to say it's a 3D platformer. It still is that fast-paced 2D style, but there are more 3D style sections that are probably more up my alley. Speaking of 3D platformers, though, we have the remake of SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, one of my favorites growing up as a kid on the PlayStation 2. And this remake, whether you are a fan of SpongeBob or not, highly recommend to my other fans, my fellow fans. What am I trying to say here? Of 3D platformers, just your classic collect-a-thon. Go into different levels, collect a bunch of stuff, do quests for Mr. Krabs, Squidward, Sandy Cheeks, Patrick Star, your other surrounding cast of SpongeBob characters, and yeah, just a lot of fun if you're a fan of 3D platformers. Another Star Ocean game that I've not played, Integrity and Faithlessness. If there's one series that I have like a deep appreciation for, but have experienced very few of its titles, it's Star Ocean. I don't know what it is, the graphical style, just being out in space, playing a JRPG, it's just very interesting to me, but I've played very few of the games in the series, so if you've played this one, let me know what you think. Still need to get around to that. Super Bomberman R, I don't think this is a game that is held in very high regard by the Bomberman fan base. I got this for super cheap, and I also just loved the graphical style. I wish we could go back to like Bomberman 64 style of game, a 3D platformer, and not just that classic Bomberman arcade gameplay. But I just don't think that's something that Konami has on their radar, but maybe someday. Next up, we have a remake of one of my favorite trilogies of all time, the Spyro Reignited trilogy, where you have those first 3 Spyro games from the PlayStation 1. It is terrific to be able to see these games reimagined with current day graphics, just breezy 3D platformers with so much charm, so much humor, just a blast to replay these games, fun trophy lists. I will never get tired of replaying the Spyro games on the PlayStation 1, and I am very much looking forward to being able to introduce my daughter to this classic trilogy of 3D platformers. Next up, we have The Outer Worlds by Obsidian. Such a breezy RPG. On the surface, this looks like a massive Fallout type experience that would run you 50 to 100 plus hours, but no, you can beat this game in like 12 to 20 based on how much you're just beelining the main story, but going off the beaten path, doing side quests, just the traditional Fallout Elder Scrolls style where you're playing in the first person, you're running around different areas on these different planets, you see different things that you can just walk up to, loot. Obviously, as you're killing people, you're running up to them and kind of cleaning them out, stealing everything that they own, all that good stuff. I just really enjoy these types of experiences and looking forward to playing The Outer Worlds 2. Maybe at the end of this year, if it still hits that release date. If Starfield wasn't your thing, look no further than The Outer Worlds, because you get that kind of Elder Scrolls in space-like experience, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. It is clearly very self-aware, it's goofy, humorous, and not as kind of like drama-filled as something like Starfield. All right, we have 2 final stacks of games to get through here. First up, we have Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD. I think this came out in both the Vita and the PS4. Similar to Bomberman, every like 4 to 5 years, randomly, I'm just, you know what I'm in the mood for? You know what I'm nostalgic for? Super Monkey Ball. And this is definitely not the best title in the series, but just that simple gameplay design of guiding these little monkey balls around these levels. It's just fun, you know? It's kind of just easy to pick up and play for short bursts and play through some of those levels. So definitely one I need to get back to and return to and finish at some point. We have The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This, of course, is based on the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man film of the same name. Swinging mechanics in this could not hold a candle to the Insomniac Spider-Man games, but if you're looking for more Spider-Man, this is one to check out and play for sure. These Spider-Man games, though, are getting pricey. On the PS3 and this one, you might be able to get this relatively cheap, but certainly the PS3 Spider-Man games are kind of nuts. So be forewarned. We have 2 games that I've not broken the seal on, which will be criminal to some, and I promise you, I will play these games to completion, but I very much want to make sure I'm of the right frame of mind. I'd consider like streaming these games, but I also don't want to be distracted while playing them. We have The Last Guardian, and we have Shadow of the Colossus. Now, I've started Shadow of the Colossus, this remake, and I remember watching a friend of mine play quite a bit of it on the PS2 when I was younger. And what really struck me about this game when I was a young kid is just how there were really no exposition dumps, no dialogue-heavy cutscenes. It was just you playing as this young man, your horse, traveling through these vast landscapes, fighting these different monsters. And clearly there was like an intentionality about the game being as like hauntingly quiet as it was, and it was kind of telling the story silently. And as a kid, it just felt like this weird underground indie film that my friend and I had stumbled upon because it was so unlike anything else we were playing at the time. So maybe this is something that I will stream in the future. Regardless, I will undoubtedly be playing it at some point because it is an absolute masterpiece and a classic for very good reason. Next up, we have the TMNT Cowabunga collection. I remember getting this for super cheap on GameFly. Has a number of the TMNT games on the original Game Boy, I think the Super Nintendo, and the arcade games as well. So fun little beat 'em ups to pick up and play with friends for sure. One of my favorites, we have The Walking Dead, the Telltale Definitive Series. So this has seasons 1 through 4, as well as the Michonne episodes and all the other random DLC stuff that came out. Still one of my absolute favorites. That first season is a classic for sure, but I don't think people show enough love to those other seasons. I think season 2 that is nearly as good as the first. Really takes a nosedive for season 3. But I think the conclusion to Clementine's story in season 4 is really good. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but it is very, very good, and especially given how turbulent things were for Skybound Studios and Telltale to wrap up and finish this. They got closed as they were in the midst of releasing those final episodes. So if you've not played this series to completion, at the very least, play that first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead. It is tremendous. We have a duo of Tales of games. We have Tales of Vesperia, the definitive edition. This is the remaster of that Xbox 360 game. My personal favorite, Tales of RPG. Just a great cast of characters, and I just love that real-time action RPG combat of these Tales of series of games. We also have Zestiria that I picked up super cheap. And I love the artwork here, kind of like a watercolor painting. But it's nice to have a bit of a backlog of those RPGs that I can pick up and play at any given time when I'm in the mood. One of my favorite games of all time, arguably my probably most played game of all time, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I don't need to tell you why this game is great. For those that love it, you know why, and for those that haven't played it, it's probably just not for you. We have Until Dawn and The Quarry. I kind of mentioned it in the first video that the Dark Pictures anthology just did not quite suck me in as much as Until Dawn. Wasn't as compelling a story. The characters were not as likable, but Until Dawn is an absolute classic. It just reminds me of those like 80s horror films where all the kids are kind of out at some cabin somewhere. Things go south fast. There's a mysterious killer on the loose. And it's just a matter of you being kind of in the driver's seat of who ends up surviving that horror adventure. I've not had an opportunity to play The Quarry yet, but very much looking forward to getting around to playing this during a spooky season here soon. We get into a collection of some of my favorite games of all time. The Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection. I go back and replay this trilogy every couple of years. A lot of people more recently I've been seeing kind of vocalizing that they're just not a big fan of these games or don't like them very much, and maybe they're overhyped or whatever, and maybe there's some truth to that. The gameplay is definitely not reinventing the wheel or changing the game in any sense of the word, but these stories and the characters and their arcs over the course of the Uncharted series, I think, is worth praising. And this first trilogy is great. I think Uncharted 4 is very high up on my top 25 PlayStation 4 games for very good reason. Graphically, still a very, very impressive looking game. And some of the kind of set piece moments that they were able to pull off with the PS4 technology at the time, very impressive. Just one of my absolute favorites. And probably top 2, top 3 Uncharted game for me, Lost Legacy, where Nate is not front and center. Instead, you're playing as Nadine Ross and Chloe, and Nate's brother also makes an appearance in this game, but kind of more of a bite-sized Uncharted game, playing as these two characters, and just a really fun kind of back and forth banter. It's more Uncharted, but it's also really, really great Uncharted. Next up, we have a kind of tactical grid-based RPG that is Wargroove. If you are familiar with the Advance Wars games on the GBA and Nintendo DS, this is unapologetically trying to emulate, one, that kind of character design, but also the gameplay. And I believe a sequel released not too terribly long ago, Wargroove 2. I've not had a chance to play this yet, but I think one that would be very fitting to play on the PlayStation Portal when I'm in the mood for some of that tactical RPG like the classic Advance Wars games. I keep saying, I sound like a broken record, but there's a reason I said at the top of this video that the PlayStation 4 is one of my favorite consoles of all time. Some of my absolute favorites, we have Wolfenstein: The New Order and The Old Blood, and also Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. I never grew up playing the classic Wolfenstein games of the past, but rebooting this character in a way where you became emotionally invested in him and the surrounding cast, I thought was great, but also some of the best first-person shooter gameplay of any first-person shooter I've probably ever played. Certainly, you can kind of go into these different levels, guns a-blazing, just blowing people up with your dual shotguns, dual machine guns, or my personal preference in terms of how I approach these games, running through these levels as stealthily as possible, taking out the captains and the guards to not alert anyone, and yeah, just very stealthily making your way around. And it's a shame that Machine Games is probably hard at work at more Indiana Jones, which I loved The Great Circle, it's terrific, but we need to see the conclusion to this trilogy, and I just don't know when, if ever, we're going to see that, because I don't think these games were selling as well as Machine Games wanted them to at the tail end with New Colossus. But I will hold out hope that we will see the conclusion of BJ Blazkowicz's story at some point. Next up, we have Vampire or Vampire. I think Don't Nod of Life is Strange fame worked on this game, and so you have a lot of the player choice and freedom to make pivotal decisions on how you approach the story. And so you can do things with your vampire abilities for good or bad, and I think that affects the overall story and outcome of the game. One I've been really, really wanting to get around to playing, but I've just not had the opportunity to do so yet, so maybe around spooky season, I'll get around to playing Vampire. And then lastly for this pile, we have The Evil Within 2. Shinji Mikami of Resident Evil 4 fame kind of went off, had his own studio, and was able to kind of continue these survival horror type experiences with The Evil Within 1 and 2. Really enjoyed the first game. Big Resident Evil 4 energy, but also kind of over the top with the psychological horror and what's actually going on in these games. So looking forward to playing the sequel here during spooky season at some point for sure. All right, we are on the final pile of games here. This is probably going on quite a bit longer than the first part, so hopefully you are enjoying this collection video for what it is and finding some good game recommendations. But first up here, we have Watch Dogs 2. I also have 1 and Legion sitting around the house somewhere. I've never played these games, and as someone who loves Ubisoft open world design, I'm sure when I get around to playing this trilogy, I will enjoy them. You're a cyber criminal running around an open world, just hacking everything. So Sounds like a good time to me, and again, as someone who's a fan of that Ubisoft open world design, I'm sure I will enjoy it. We have Trials of Mana, just another game in the Mana series, just kind of a fun hack and slash action RPG, kind of a fun graphical style too, so one that I'll probably pop in if I'm looking to kind of just play a breezier JRPG with a story that probably isn't something I'm going to be too interested in. Next up, we have Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami. I said at my PS5 collection video, I've been wanting to get into the Yakuza series. I've played quite a bit of 0, but these are games that you have to be really focused, reading the subtitles, and you're in for a long 30-plus hour experience pretty much with every Yakuza game you play. So it's not for lack of interest. Being able to explore Japan, and there's just so much about these games that look incredible, not the least of which is their very compelling stories. But again, I have to just be very in a particular state of mind to want to jump into those game experiences. We will someday, I promise. We have One Piece World Seeker. I am not someone who probably has the patience to get through the One Piece manga or anime ever in my lifetime, but I do have a appreciation for the character and the world that Ichiro Oda has created. And if you are looking for a breezy action RPG similar to Trials of Mana set in the One Piece universe, look no further. You can get through this game in like 12 to 15 hours. Naturally, there's a lot of side stuff that you can do to kind of get more out of the experience to be a 20-plus hour action RPG. But again, a simple action RPG with some open world design elements that is set in that One Piece world. We have two games that are deeply personal and special to me. First up, we have Yooka-Laylee. I am in the process of making a retrospective review of this game. There's so much I want to say, and I feel like I need to say, not to necessarily defend the game itself, but to kind of defend the reasons why it's so special to me. And kind of the SparkNotes version is not that this is a perfect 3D platformer. It has its problems. There's a lack of polish in a lot of areas in the game. But for me, coming out of college and really just missing the collectathon 3D platformers of my childhood, like Spyro, DK64, Banjo-Kazooie, there was a long drought of those type of games on the Xbox 360 and even into the PS4 generation. This to me reminded me why I fell in love with those classic, more open style collectathon 3D platformers of the past, even with all of the game's blemishes. And so I just have a lot of respect for what Playtonic Games created here, even if it tends to get more hate than love nowadays. And then we have the pseudo-sequel here, Impossible Lair, which is more of a Donkey Kong Country style of 2D platformer. Outstanding music and overall soundtrack that very much is emulating that David Wise DKC style of soundtrack. Fun level design, and the last level is absolutely punishing. It wasn't until recently that I finally got around to rolling credits and beating the Impossible Lair. More on that in a future Platinum Trophy video that's coming real soon. But I think more often than not, people tend to favor this game over the 3D platformer for all the reasons I understand. But more on why I love Yooka-Laylee in a future video. We have Yoku's Island Express, which is a gated exploration type of 2D platformer, but with a fun twist because you're basically a pinball making your way through this level. So really neat kind of take on the gated exploration 2D platformer style with a fun little soundtrack, just a little charming game. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have a collection of Ys games. First, we have 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, 9 Monstrum Nox, and then Memories of Celceta. We have the premium edition here as well. I think the Ys are just, for me, the series has just become kind of comfort food RPG when I'm not looking to be like deeply invested in a story, but I'm looking for kind of just that breezy, quick, fast-paced action RPG style. the E series is always a go-to for me. Outstanding music as well. So major shout out to Happy Console Gamer for introducing me to that fantastic JRPG series. And then last but certainly not least here, making sure I've included everything, we have a series of PlayStation VR titles. I was a very late adopter of PSVR 1, and at some point way down the road, I might buy PlayStation VR 2, but like the Vita, PlayStation just did not really support these things long term. I think there are some genuine gems on PlayStation VR that's worth investing in the technology nowadays. You can probably get on eBay. I think I got a lot or a bundle for less than $100, and for me, it was worth the price of admission. We have Rick and Morty Virtual Reality, which I think is just a fun way in a VR version to kind of play out some events of the cartoon. If you're familiar with that and you like that sense of humor, maybe this is a game worth checking out. But I'll save some of the best for last here. We have Until Dawn Rush of Blood, which is essentially where you get to go through a spooky, horror-themed amusement park in VR fashion. So you're playing some carnival type games, you're riding roller coasters, riding carnival rides, you're doing it all, and it's kind of spooky. So a fun game to pop in and play during the spooky season for sure. We have Everybody's Golf VR. We talked about the mainline kind of console version earlier. This is more of that, but in a VR style, and such a blast if you are a fan of the Hot Shots Golf games. We have Star Trek Bridge Crew, a game that I recently picked up because while I'm not a huge fan of the Star Trek, the original series, my dad was a huge fan, so I have watched quite a bit of it over the course of my life. But what makes this game particularly unique is that it is intended to be a cooperative experience where you're playing with other people online and each person takes on a different role of the ship. And so there's like different objectives that you have to complete, like rescuing stranded ships kind of scattered around space, engaging with Klingon vessels, and really you need to kind of communicate effectively with your partner, whoever you're going through the adventure with. So shout out to my friend Blinkoom. I believe he has this game. We need to play this. We need to squad up, okay? I will be the Captain Kirk to your Spock, and we will go on a Star Trek VR adventure. But again, most people probably wouldn't know that a game like this exists. And I think there's a lot more of the VR library that I want to continue to explore that I've not had an opportunity to play yet. One that I've criminally not finished yet is Astrobot Rescue Mission. Yes, did you know that Astro's Playroom, eventually Astrobot, got his debut as a VR game back in the day, and it is terrific. Think 3D platformer, Astrobot and Playroom, but in a VR style. That is this. It is oozing and overflowing with all of the charm that you would expect, and that creative level design is also front and center. So need to go back to that and eventually earn the Platinum Trophy for sure. That is a wrap, everyone. That is the entirety of my PlayStation 4 library. Like I said at the top, there's probably a handful of games that are still scattered around the house, but for the most part, that is my PlayStation 4 game collection. So my hope after these two parts is that you're walking away from this video with a couple of game recommendations. But as always, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what some of your favorite PlayStation 4 games are. Also, let me know if there are any notable omissions over the course of these two videos, games that I need to add to my personal wish list. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.